Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie making process. Hosted by Silent Films, back when they took no talking in the movie theater very seriously. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Streamberry. Watch the latest in modern entertainment, including the hit new show Todd is Awful, only on Streamberry. Terms and conditions may apply. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. I write and direct and edit, and we act, and Todd does all kinds of music. A lot more to be said on that in days, weeks, months, eons ahead. And we take all of that, and what we like to do, the reason we call this The Pestle is because we take a film and we grind it up, see what it's made of, what's the parts that are ticking or not ticking, why is it working the way it's working, and hopefully along the way make something new, right? You take a mortar and pestle and grind up wheat to make flour, to make bread. We grind up a movie to make this show and to understand a little bit more, I guess, the creative process at times. I mean, it's all in flux. Like sometimes it's specifically about films, and then other times, you know, there's so much application in creative fields, whether you're making a movie, making a music song, you know, performing, whatever, live theater. There's so much overlap and crossover between creative arts and humanity writ large that it's always fascinating just to see, because stories and storytelling encompass everything. Right? Just because we're covering a movie, the movie is going to be talking about a thing. And it's so much broad applicability in life because humanity is creative. That's, you know, kind of our special thing is our creativity. And just because we're talking about movies, you know, life itself is always presenting itself in any given movie. And I love how as a species we connect and learn about each other through stories and storytelling. Yeah. So it's just always fascinating how much you can take away from a movie about life, even though, you know, we go there at times. We try to keep it about the movie. But, you know, life happens along the way, as Ferris Bueller, I think, said at some point.
Did you just quote Ferris Bueller?
As we do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you could do a podcast or have a conversation about movies that's meaningful without it bleeding into your life and you know, relating. Like, really, you know, we're sitting here and we're talking about, yeah, I mean, you know, you talk about cinematography and you know, acting and stuff, but at the same time, that's all people, like, we relate to films and stories through experiences in our life or through the way that we relate to people. And the way that we relate to characters is, you know, if we've had similar experiences or if we identify with how they're feeling or how they're acting, you know, like, I think it's important for us, you and I, to have those stories, those personal stories or those personal experiences that we kind of lay bare here. Because if not, then I don't know. It just seems a little fake, honestly. You know,
Yeah.
There's been times on this podcast where we've gotten, you know, pretty emotional, and I think that that sets us apart. I'm not sure. I just wouldn't want to do this if those moments didn't happen, to be honest. So,
I completely agree. I mean, stories are so universal, you know, in so many ways, and that's why it's hard to break out of certain patterns and certain molds of storytelling, right? You hear about the circle clock, you know, storytelling method, and the hero's journey, and you know, and you can, in a lot of ways, back your way into these in any given story. Like, oh, this is the moment when they had, you know, Dark Night of the Soul, and you kind of map it onto these beats, and it's just because we've all had so many similar experiences. So telling new stories, you got your work cut out for you. But even if you tell a new story, you probably want to tell it in an old way. Or if you want to tell an old story, you might want to tell it in a new way. And so it's just hard to break new ground for good reason, because we all have so much overlap and universal themes in our own lives. That's why a movie can be so specific, and it's tackling something you've never experienced directly, and yet because your emotions run the same gamut, you can still identify and connect with these characters. You know, I've never lived in Germany, never been to Germany, you know, but I don't have to go there in order to understand, you know, certain elements and certain, you know, parts of a story that they might tell that's very specific to German culture. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to understand more about the world, more about yourself. Yeah, and we try to bring all of that into every episode, and hopefully today will be no different. But TBD, I expect chaos.
As you always do.
As I always
do. So today we are covering Run Lola Run. If you haven't seen this, please pause this episode, go watch it, because they will spoil a lot of stuff. I mean, especially a movie like this. It's a short runtime. It's like an hour 20.
Yeah.
So it goes pretty fast.
Very quick. We'll talk about a handful of things for sure. The visual signature. I mean, this has such a strong visual style. It's easy to pick out. Run Lola Run. There's a lot. I feel like for years and years, there were so many visual references to it. And just pop culture, not even like homage, you know, style. And we'll also look at some of the story and writing, time, soccer, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. I'm going to botch these names. There's only 2 of them.
I really truly debated putting like 15 names in there just to hear you read them all.
God, I would kill you.
I was so close.
After a botched money delivery, Lola has 20 minutes to come up with 100,000 Deutschmarks. Written and directed by Tom Tykwer. Cinematography by Frank Griebe, featuring Franka Potente as Lola and Moritz Bleibtreu as Manni.
Perfect. Uva will be proud of you.
Bleibtreu, I'm sure, is perfect.
For like weeks, I was pronouncing Uva's name as Ew. and thancefully, he set me straight. I'm like, oh, man, was I way off. So this episode is dedicated to you, my bud. My bud.
Thank you, sir.
So no clip. I also debated playing like a random little German clip, maybe not even from this film, and passing it off as Run Lola Run. And Uva would be the only person that caught it. But yeah, no clip. It's all in German, and my German is worse than my English. And so first time watching Run Lola Run. If not, I assume it's been a while.
Yeah, it was my first time. I'd heard of it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard of it a lot. Obviously, I feel like it's I don't know, made the rounds. I'm not sure if it's like an underground kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, in the last 20, 30 years, it's the most well-known German film. I don't know what else I would really put up against it, you know, in contemporary film. Yeah. So really, yeah, very well known, probably slightly underground, even though it bubbles up, you know, to pop level. It's an odd one. It's an odd one.
Yeah. I loved it. I thought the acting was great. I thought the writing was fun and aggressive. What year did this come out?
98.
Yeah. So, I don't know. This style I feel like was popular at the time. You know, like the quick cuts, the quick zooms in the cut and everything. And I feel like it does it really well. It seems like a low budget film. I'm not sure what the budget was, but in the best way. You know what I'm saying? Like you can make a low budget film that doesn't feel like it. Where like if you sat down and analyzed it like we're about to, you could pick some things apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like specific things, but that we can talk about in a minute. But you can make so much, especially now. I mean, like think about how to make a film like this in 1998. You know, budget or not, it's harder. It was much harder to make a film. I mean, you know, we didn't have phones like we did today. Barely had the internet. You know, it was like super hard, or much harder. And nowadays it's so easy. And if you have like 1 or 2 cheap lights, you could do this. You could make this movie right now. Mm-hmm. And it's the interesting thing about this movie is that it's all about the story, and it's all about these little moments, I feel like, that tell you so much about what just happened, right? It just, I don't know how to explain it. Like almost like at the end of, because it's 3 segments, and at the end of each segment, something happens, and so much is told to you by like a split-second reaction that lasts for a few seconds about what just happened. You can see them thinking. You can see Lola thinking, and then you can see Manni thinking, and then it goes into something else. And then I really love that. And I love that it's the action heightens the suspense. However, we kind of know what's coming after we see it the first time. We kind of, okay, where's the guy on the bike? Okay, where's the homeless guy? Okay, where's that woman? And I love how they give like little tiny backstories of everybody that she runs past with the Polaroid sound, or the photography sound. It's just a little extra. It's fantastic, and it was a lot of fun. And because I didn't know the ending, I went into it as it was going through. I was like, okay, I got this. We're going to go through this a couple of times. Okay. All right. But each time it was a little bit different. And so even when I was seeing something that I thought I had seen before, it was a little bit different. And so it made it fresh. The spots that I think, well, the one specific spot that was like obvious low budget was the shot always with her dad and that woman in the room. So grainy and like, backlit to hell. I don't know why they shot it into a window like that. It was like they had their ISO up to like 12,000 or something. I don't know. It was so grainy and dirty. And that was fine if that was what they were going for, but that was the only shot that was like that in the whole film that I noticed. Okay, there might've been others that were grainier, but that jumped out at me every single time, like all 3 cycles through. So, but whatever, it didn't bother me. It took me out for a second and then I got right back in. And if it was motivated, cool. I just didn't get it.
Right.
And then we get a lot of backstory with Lola through the way her dad reacts. He's just such a prick. That like we kind of see, okay, she's had a hard life. She's gone down this hard road. That's kind of why she's with Manni. And then the acting at the end is so wonderful when she sees him and he's okay. He got the money and he's walking to her and you see that she's questioning everything, and then, he greets her and they start walking away and then he asks her what's in the bag and then we cut. It's a perfect ending. It just is so good. She doesn't they don't give her or let her respond at all. They don't take it any farther. They just let you imagine how she would respond. But I just love that you can see on her face that she's questioning, being with him in general. Like, why, how did I get here? Basically like what the heck just happened? Is this right? Were one of the other endings better than this one? Because, like this is kind of like not good. And anyway, it just, I really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, same. Like I haven't seen this probably in 15 years. Like I think I watched this in the mid 2000s. And I've been really dying to rewatch it because it's held such a strong visual note in my head. And so revisiting it, I couldn't remember anything really. I remembered her running and the nuns. And that was it. Like I don't know why those nuns on the sidewalk and they're barely in it. They're there for like 4 seconds total in the movie. And yet in my head, they're like a feature. And so rewatching it, I was expecting to understand it a lot stronger because of how much more I feel like I've begun to understand about film and storytelling, and I feel like I'm dumber. Like I don't understand anything. And I think that's part of the point. We'll come back to that in a minute, I guess. But I loved it though. It's such a great journey. The colors are so strong. he's got this bright yellow hair. He's in this bright yellow phone booth. She's got this bright red hair. She has her bright red phone. Like the strong visuals of this movie make it really easy to identify, and I don't know, connect with in a weird way, because it has all this frenetic pacing like you're talking about. Part of it's probably the style of the time, but I think it also plays very much into the ideas of the film itself, which again, come back to that in a minute, because I have are questions, as the man says at the beginning. Every answer that I get leads to another question, and it's beautiful in that way, if frustrating. And so the frenetic pacing, really wide angles at times, dramatic close-ups, even at the beginning, right? Instead of an establishing shot, which is normally 2 cuts, right? Maybe 3, you go wide. Oh, we're in the town square, and oh, there's the phone booth. Oh, here's a close-up of him coming into the phone booth. Nope, we're going to go wide and do this like undercranked push in where we just walk into it, not on a dolly, nothing. And they clearly have dollies and cranes. Some of these crane shots are freaking amazing. Like they're so, so good. And yet they're like, nope, we're going to walk into it, because once we fast forward this, like speed it up in post, it's going to create this weird kinetic energy, right? And they do the same thing with her phone at the beginning. We do this wide and we just zoom into it with our feet, right? Not an actual telescopic zoom. We're going to walk into it, and it's just like, it's just crazy. It's frenetic. And I love it. And then of course all the colors are popping, right? Her hair, her green pants. Part of the visual style of the film is just her running, right? And you see a movie named Run, Lola Run, you do expect some running, and they do not disappoint. There is plenty of running. And I love it. And I can't quite pin down what all the colors are about. I don't know. Red could just be a signature of love. And right, because if you look at all the red things in the film, and there's so many, right? Her hair, the flashback conversations, right? The pillow talk with her and Manni, the ambulance, her father's lover is a redhead even, and the soccer shirt of the guy who steals the bicycle, like so much red everywhere. The other strong visual styling of this is what you were talking about a minute ago, which is the formats. There are multiple formats throughout this movie, right? We obviously have 35 millimeter film, but then we have stills, right? All those flash forwards that we see, these people's futures are in stills, probably also 35, even though they're making these like Polaroid sound effects. And then we have the black and white flashbacks. So when we go backwards in time, it's all in black and white, and sometimes in slow-mo, sometimes cranked up and fast forward, usually fast forward, and this kind of weird kooky kinetic energy as well. But they also have digital video. That's the shots in the office with the dad and the lover. But we also see these digital shots of the car wreck, right? With her dad's friend, or I don't know what that guy is. He's some kind of coworker, and maybe a chairman or something. And everything with him is digital video. We also, when we branch off away from Lola, we see a lot of digital videos with like the guy in the soccer shirt. He goes in, and on that third run through, he goes and meets the homeless guy with the money, sells him the bike, right? That's all digital video. And so there's this branching timeline, or non-Lola, non-Manni timeline that they use other formats for. And then of course, animation. They use actual animation. It's not just a title sequence. We're actually going to use animation in the heartbeats of the film, right? When she's coming down the stairway, like that's a whole other animation. And that could be a style choice. All of this could just be pure style choices. And I think it probably is. But you could also make the argument that it's a budget saving thing, because yeah, this is probably a low budget. I mean, if they had more than like $1 to $3 million, I would be shocked. I mean, some of these locations are probably very expensive and ate up all the budget. Like getting into a bank, for instance, not going to be cheap. Getting into that store, probably not as expensive as the bank, but still probably not very cheap. And so maybe you look to cut corners and say, how can we cut corners while still playing into some of the ideas and themes of the film. Probably switching out formats. The animation isn't like this highbrow style, right? It feels very Portishead, right? Just kind of this crazy,
That's
big,
a great description.
simple, right? It's beautiful. It's very much accomplishing, I think, not just the aesthetic goals, but the spiritual goals of the film, which still coming to be announced. Cinematography wise, I don't have a lot. I love there's a sequence in the first run through where we're watching her run, and we're watching her run through like the camera shooting through like this gate or this fence. And so it's got this beautiful parallax happening, motion blur. She's relatively still in the frame. So it's almost like she's not advancing at all within the frame. And instead, everything is whirring by her, right? Just whooshing. And so you have all this beautiful motion blur. And what's great is, I don't know how long that shot actually is in terms of how much space she covers, but let's say it's a shot for like 50 feet. And so you're going to set up track, which they probably did. It's probably like 50 feet of actual track, because it's a really nice locked off shot. Some shots are probably in the back of like some kind of rickshaw and they're just grabbing what they can. Some shots are clearly in a truck. Again, they clearly had some really nice budget for some of these crane shots, are just fantastic. They had these beautiful overhead shots in like the town square, whatever that municipal courthouse building thing is, which at some times looks like she's running at 11 o'clock. Almost, if you were to create an overlap of a clock on that frame, it's like she's running at 11 and she's trying not to let it get to midnight, or to, noon, when everything goes to shit. And so there's all these interesting cinematography visual elements, but with that tracking shot through the fence that I'm talking about, I love what I assume the way I would approach that moment is, if I really want to drag this moment out, which I think they really do, to give you the sense that she's running as hard as she physically can and she's not getting anywhere. And so you set up this 50 feet of track, shoot it wide, got it. Now we're going to reset, still on the same, track, go back to the one. And now we're going to shoot a medium close up of her in, from whatever chest to the top of her head. Then we're going to reset and we're going to do it again. Now we're going to shoot her feet, right? Now you've gotten 150 feet out of one setup, and you can just kind of keep cutting in like, oh, wide. Now we're going to punch into, her face. She's still running, now we're going to punch into her feet, still running. And so it just is a really great way to maximize one single setup, especially because you need that time. They do. I'll come back to the runtime. And then, man, the other cool thing about all the running she's doing, excellent work on makeup and wardrobe. Excellent. Because she's not sweating at all. Like, it's such a light mist. And I would be surprised if they're not shooting other than like spring. I think you want to shoot this as close to winter as you can, where everything's melted, as cool as you can get it to help everything. But they also blow out all the highlights throughout the film. Everything, the sky usually has this yellow tint, so it feels like summer. It feels gross and hot, and you kind of empathize with her on this kind of emotional level. And yet they do a really good job of keeping an eye on her wardrobe. No sweat spots at all. The entire movie, it's incredible. Her makeup, flawless the entire time. And even when she has lines while running, I'm sure her like cardio is through the roof in training for this thing, because, but I'm sure they also do a really good job of giving her a moment, catch her breath. Because there's a few times when she's running, she has a line, she is not one iota out of breath. Like, she could have been standing still and delivering that dialogue. Like, she talks to the guy on the bicycle a couple times, and she's like, no, I'm fine. Like, full resonance. Like, she sounds amazing. I'm really impressed. What did you think of just her running style? How did that appeal to you as a more than an avid runner?
Yeah, it was awesome. Because she can't be too perfect. she doesn't look like She doesn't look like a runner, right? She's not. This is not something that she's not going out for an afternoon jog.
Yeah,
and she's wearing boots and like pants. So she needed to run like someone who isn't an avid runner necessarily, but who knows how to run in a way that's not annoying to the viewer. I mean, because it's honestly, like, I'm being real, it could be very annoying to people the way somebody runs. I mean, the daughter in Taken. I'll just use that as an example. So annoying. I can't even think about it. It makes me mad. But she runs really well. And, another great example is Tom Cruise and the way he has elevated his running style throughout the years. If you watch Tom in the early years of his running, his style is one way. And then now watching him, it's like a totally different. And it's an art, of like not just running in general, but running on screen. And I think that she just absolutely nails it for her character, Yeah. Great question.
Well said. Yeah, really well said. I didn't even factor in the boots concept. And yeah, and she has to do it the entire freaking movie. And yet, I never got tired of it. Like, it never really bored me. They do a great job, I think, with the music choices and then finding ways to break it up visually. Like, oh, we're going to give her this segment. And even when they repeat those segments, they do it in, like you said, a slightly different way. We're going to go from, like, even the overhead shots in that little municipal square, they go from letting her run from, like, I don't know, 5 to 11 o'clock, let's say. And then, but that first time she's cutting across the squares in a diamond fashion. The next time we do it, she's still running from 5 to 11, but now they've lined up the squares with her. So she's running down like one of the, you could call it an aisle, like this brick aisle. And so they constantly find these little interesting tweaks to keep everything fresh. And including just a nice tracking shot. We're going to go from low to high, and we're going to, do a crane tracking shot. And it's amazing. Like, I'm watching it in the background right now, and they literally have this shot of her running down the street, and we're sitting street level watching her run towards the camera, and we're just going to track to the right with her. Then the camera's going to rise along the way until it just keeps rising and rising, rising. And it goes from street level to overhead. And suddenly we're seeing nothing but street. And it's like she's being crushed by this run. Visually, it's just a beautiful visual metaphor for what she's experiencing throughout the day and along the way. Amazing. So this is what I was talking about before. I don't know what this movie's about, y'all. On the one hand, just to get into story and writing, I find it absolutely hysterical that this is a movie made by, Germans. It's a German, Tykwer. I don't know how to pronounce this gentleman's name, but I find it really funny for a German filmmaker to make a movie about time. And effectively, entire movie is about how someone was a couple minutes late and now it ruined everything. The world spun out of control, off its axis. People got flung into outer space. Like, it's just, time stopped making sense, right? Just because someone was a few minutes late. And the reason that's funny, I think the only thing I know about German culture is that they're an incredibly punctual group of people. Like, I'm a punctual person, and they're more punctual than I am, and they will let you know it too. Like, it's a country full of Wes's.
Oh my God.
But I just think it's really, really funny that this is the whole crux of this movie is about someone was late to pick someone up and everything went to hell. That's really, really funny. But on a more thematic level, seems to be about chaos theory, right? And it's looking at how the initial starting conditions can wildly vary outcomes. Right. And that's the whole idea behind the butterfly effect, right? You change one little thing, a bird or butterfly flapping its wings in the Pacific can cause a hurricane, in the Atlantic or whatever. And it's just very, influenced by conditions at the start, can just vary completely. And this seems to be a lot about that. And I think that's kind of where soccer comes in. The way I was trying to think about it was soccer, the guy's comment at the beginning, right? The security guard seems to be this kind of godlike figure, just kind of in street clothes, right? He keeps making these comments to Lola that she is confused about. Like, she has no idea. And he's at the beginning, he's like, some days it's just not your day. And then the second run through, he's like, hey, sometimes it's just not your day. You can't have everything. And she's like, well, grabs his gun, right? She takes matters into her own hands. And then the last one, he's kind of checking his watch. He's like, finally, here you are. And so he seems to be this kind of out of time person. Maybe he's our perspective in the sense that I don't think she's aware of the time resets. At certain points, I kept waiting for her to make a comment to her dad, right, about what she learned in that first run through. She learns that's not her dad. And yet it doesn't stop her, right? We get to the end and suddenly, she's holding his hand. She's bringing him back to life. And so there's this really strong emotional element and story being told between her and her dad. And yet I don't know if there's a lot of carryover if she's experiencing this over and over again. I think we think she is because that's our experience. And I think we're, projecting it onto her. But the more I watch this movie, the more I'm like, I don't think she knows. I don't know if she's aware. Fucking fly. I'm going to kill you. I got his ass. Motherfucker.
Mr. Miyagi. You need some chopsticks.
I do. Get up there. Get into my trap.
Oh my God.
It's chaos. I got your
chaos
ass.
Theory.
You're done. You little shit. I won.
You got him?
Yeah.
Yes. Good. Yeah. You need some new blinds, but
I do need blinds.
small price to pay.
All that stuff. Oh my God. Yeah. Chaos.
That was fantastic. You couldn't write that. Do not cut that out. Do not cut that out. This one was not for the kids.
This is not for the kids. And so I don't know. I think soccer and that's what he's talking about at the beginning. Because right, he has that. It opens with this quote from T.S. Eliot, and that is from this quartet of poems. I had to look this up. I haven't read a ton of T.S. Eliot, a little bit. I'm not great on poetry, to be honest. I've read like Ginsberg and Eliot. Your wife let me read some of her T.S. Eliot books. And it's great. I mean, it's amazing. This quartet seems to be about time and all kinds of interesting things, repetition. And in that way, it also seems to be talking about chaos theory. But after he quotes T.S. Eliot, he immediately, weirdly quotes a soccer coach. I had to look this guy up. I was like, who is S. Herberger? Sepp Herberger. And he's a German soccer coach. And the quote was, after the game is before the game. And it's this kind of cyclical idea that, there is no end. There's always another game. Just because you finished one, it's this kind of mind-bending concept. After the game is before the game. And that's kind of what they're experiencing in the movie, right? It's just this unending sequence. But in soccer, as in any sport, like the initial conditions are all kind of the same, right? And that's what he says. The ball is round. The game lasts 90 minutes. That's a fact. Everything else is pure theory. And so even though chaos theory, right? Even though you have very similar starting conditions, you have a round ball, you have this pitch, you have 90 minutes to compete. The conditions completely change all the time. And if you were to play the same game back to back, obviously different results. We just inherently understand that. It's not even a question. It's like super obvious stuff. And I think that's kind of emblematic of the film in so many ways, are being inserted into the film. That idea of everything changes, right? She bumps into that random woman in the bank, just to take one example of one of the people she runs into, right? The first time, what happens? Literally, she like scooches out of the way in the hallway. And what becomes her fate? She gets into a car wreck and she gets addicted to painkillers and then drugs, and then she dies. Like that's her effect. But like the second time through, what happens? She instead goes on to meet the teller, the same one in the bank heist, where Lola steals all the money. So this random woman in the bank, meets the teller and they get into bondage and she has a happy life, right? Two wildly different outcomes with almost no difference at all. And it's really fascinating and just kind of, and so chaos theory. I think the whole strangle of this film, you did not walk away from that. I'm going to lose my mind. This fly.
This is Breaking Bad. This is that episode of Breaking Bad.
It's
this
happening.
Is fantastic. We're keeping it all. We'll do it live.
And it's on my toe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I love that you know, and they do it in a brilliant way with the photographs. You know, we get an instant view of the change or of what happens. We don't really know at first. You know, she runs past that lady with the stroller and we see, you know, what she did. Lottery. She stole this kid. Yeah. Or well, first she stole a kid, right?
Oh, right.
Wasn't it that first? And then the next time she runs by, she wins the lottery. We're like, oh, okay. So that's different. All right. And you don't really, even then, maybe you don't really get it. You just need that third time through and you're like, oh, something is changing. And that one thing that's changing is changing them. Okay. Got it. But they give you the backstory in such an interesting way. And very quickly, I mean, in 5-6 seconds, you get a view. And it's so, the human mind is amazing. Our brains are incredible. We get a split second for each of those pictures. I mean, it had to be like 7 frames or something like that for each of those photos. And you get like 6 photos and you know the future of that human being. It's pretty amazing. And it's pretty ingenious to do that, knowing that people will get it in just a few photographs.
Yeah.
You know, and it's cheap, right? I mean, yeah, you got to do all these setups and stuff, but you just need a photograph. That's it. You know, cut. And then to do that for multiple people, I thought it was brilliant. And yeah, great call on the chaos theory. Yeah.
It's so good. And I think they're inserting chaos all over the place, like everywhere, even the quotes at the beginning. And I think that's why it's offset in this weird way, right? You have T.S. Eliot kind of beautifully centered and framed and composed. And then this other quote from the soccer coach is just off down to the left. It's not spaced very well. Like, it's just like, what's happening? And I think that's also why there's so many formats throughout the film, right? 35 millimeter film stock and stills and black and white and digital and speed ramping and animation. And like, it's just throwing you all over the place. And I think, yeah, it's just telling this bigger story about how everything changes and nothing stays the same. I don't know. And to go back to soccer, I think there's probably other layers of symbolism that I just don't really get or can't put my finger on. And right, soccer has like red cards, green cards, blue cards. And I think different people are representing different things at different times. Manni, you know, when he gets killed, it's a green bag that he's holding, right, with all the money from the heist. And he gets killed by the ambulance, and then we reset, right? When she dies at the beginning, she was holding the red bag gets flung into the air. That could be a red card. And then at the very end, I don't know. Again, this is all super conjecture on my part. The homeless guy I thought was interesting. He's wearing this blue coat, And what does he do? He exchanges the money for a gun. Now you have this homeless guy armed with a bicycle as well, for whatever that's worth. And it's just, what's he going to do with that gun? I don't know. But there's
chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to say that I have my finger on all of it. And maybe that's partly the point. It feels super chaotic, but it also feels very purposeful. I don't think it's not thought out. I think I just don't understand it. I haven't decoded it. And maybe that's because of any number of reasons. One, my appreciation of soccer is right next to pottery. And two, I'm not, German culture appreciator either. Like, I don't understand probably a lot that's happening within the context of the film that would help me, unwind some of this stuff. Unwind being a pun. Thank you. But throughout the film, there's also this really nice thing that happens, which is chaos, right? The whole 20-minute sequence is just frenetic and punching you. And then we do these really amazing flashbacks with the red light conversation, lover talks between Manni and Lola. And it's so good. It's this perfect break to change the pace and tone of the film. You take this breath, and it's so good because it also gives us a chance to see them together, right? To watch them bond, as we get to bond with them as a couple, because otherwise they're mostly separate, but we kind of need to be rooting for them to both be okay. So we need these moments to see them together, intimate, having these conversations. And I love that it's not one-sided. It's not just Lola doing the classic girl asking the impossible questions meant to trap you, because the second time through, right, after Manni dies, now he's asking the questions and he's looking for a reason to live and to go on. And he's looking for that through her. And so they're both completing each other in this way. And then of course one thing I really love about this movie is there's only emotional reasoning and logic on why we reset. There's no rule. There's no God that actually steps in and says, one more try. And there's really just this emotional reasoning. And for her, it's, I'm not ready yet. Stop. Right. I love that moment where then her voice is a really interesting aspect with this as well, because she when she uses it, it can shatter glass. It can stop time. It can reset time. When she dies that first time and she's debating and she says, I don't want to leave yet. Stop. And then suddenly the phone drops again and she's reset and she's going to go again. But at the same time, it can't do everything. It can't talk her father into helping her. Right. But it can get her 80 cents, right? She goes to the casino, which is an amazing out of nowhere segment. She goes to the casino. She has 99 marks and like 20 cents. And she's like, I need 100. And the girl looks at her. It's like, yeah, you only have, you're short. She's like, bitte, please, I guess. That was the other thing I always think about with this movie is her saying bitte like 1,000 times. And it's just this beautiful little moment where she does. She's like, hey, here you go, $100. And she goes, throws it on 20. 20 seems to be this recurring number, right? She has 20 minutes to get there. She bets on 20. And she has 99 marks and 20 cents or 20 tenths of a mark. I don't know if they call that cents over there. And she bets on 20, wins, gets 3,500 out of it. And she doubles down. And it's so freaking amazing. Because that moment, she screams on that second time. And it's freaking hilarious. Like, I died. I burst out because I'm like, this is so inappropriate. Like, what? Where did this come from? Like, you're yelling at these people, and I love seeing them freak out. And yet, the longer it holds, it becomes dramatic. It, for me, goes from like, oh my God, I can't stop laughing, until the desperation kicks in. You're like, she needs this. Ooh. And suddenly it's just beautiful. It's just punching you. And she gets it and everyone's like frozen, time stops, right? And she's got just a couple more minutes to get there. And she does, and everything's okay. And of course, Manni worked it out on his own as well. Suddenly they're both working in tandem through the fates, through just chaos, and suddenly instead of poorer 100,000 marks, they're richer 120 some odd thousand marks. And that's when the movie cuts. What does it cut on? The Polaroid flash, because now we get to imagine what their future is. From here, anything can happen. Anything is possible because their new starting conditions are wildly different from what they were going to be in those other two scenarios. Yeah. I don't know, man. I have no idea. I just know I love it. I love it for so many reasons. I also love the runtime. If you chop out the opening and ending credits, this is like a 71-minute film. And I'm really fascinated with these 70 to 80-minute runtimes. Like this is by the clock, I think 79 minutes. But the end has like 4.5 minutes of credits. And then there's like a couple minutes at the beginning after the opening, whatever titles and the little weird like mobby thing with the voiceover. 71 minutes. And it's so brilliant because it's 3 20-minute sequences on top of that. And they do a pretty good job of staying right around 20 minutes. It's not perfect. It's not like you can set your watch by it. Sorry, Germany. But it's pretty close to like 20 minutes each. And it's really fascinating as a method of coming up with a story idea of like, I don't maybe need to write 90 pages. Maybe if I write 20 pages and I just do it 3 times, like I can just vary things a little bit here and there to tell some bigger story. Like that's really cool. And part of me wants to bite it because at that point, all he did, right, was say, okay, now we're going to have these 20-minute sequences and then we're going to have a conversation that sets us up. Here's our scenario, tribe. And then like this little interlude in between that resets the day. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what it's about. It's all crazy. I love all the repetition. Even at the beginning, there's repetition, right? The bag. And it's like 50 different shots of them saying nothing but the bag. And it's still playing into this whole chaos theory, concept. Yeah. I don't know, man. I love it. I adore it. I think it's genius. And there's a reason we haven't seen anything like this since. Yeah. What say you?
Dude, I'm curious what you think about the end. I'm curious about what you think about her reaction to him as he was walking up to her.
I think I saw it differently. I was reading fear and yet a sense of peace. Like, I just know things are going to be okay. Like I'm waiting. Everything was dead quiet. Like there was not a person on the street and she was looking up the street, nothing. Where is he? And so, yeah, I kind of read that as she is waiting to see what happens. She's there. She's in time. She's on time. She's not late. Everything should be fine if she's on time. And so there's a sense of calm, and yeah, just waiting. I don't know. I read all those things into it. That's the kind of the beauty of, kind of keeping a neutral expression like that. You can project onto it whatever you want, I think we as an audience know everything's okay, but we're also waiting. I'm fascinated though that you're like, she's wondering if this is the best life for her, because that's interesting too. I don't know. I feel like they're destined to be together, and she was on time. She was on time, Todd.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's awesome because there was no ounce of me that thought that she was happy to be there.
Interesting.
When she saw him, I think that, well, she was happy to be there until she saw him and that he was okay and everything was all right. And then it just felt like she was just questioning everything. Like all of a sudden, all 3 of the scenarios played out in her mind. And she's thinking, is it worth it? Like, that's what I don't, yeah. But I love that you see it completely opposite from that, seemingly, where maybe not completely, but like, just kind of like, okay, this is it. But she doesn't say a word.
She doesn't. And it's interesting because
and she doesn't even kiss him really.
Right. She stops. He kisses her, and she just is holding. I think that's interesting. I think the way I read that was she was stunned. Like
okay.
Maybe she was expecting the worst, but watching it now, I think you might be onto something. Like it might be this life is too chaotic for me, because even as she's walking with him, she's looking down. And
and she's holding the bag, and they do a close up on the bag.
Yeah.
Kind of to remind you of what she has, what she got on her own through her own voice. You know, I don't know.
But the last frame of her is smiling. And I think that's why I projected like hope and love and a future.
Okay.
Because the
the strength of the movie, right?
Yeah.
You and I both see it. Like, yeah.
Oh man.
Cool.
It's good, bro. I think it's a smart movie for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is coming up with an idea that you can execute on a really good budget that has a high concept and is emotionally engaging and visually exciting in so many ways. Brilliant. I just think it's a very, very brilliant film. And yet I still know that I've cracked like 1% of what this thing is trying to tell me. And that's a really cool feeling too, because when I come back to revisit it in a few years, I know that I'll learn something else. Because even watching like the security guard, I think there's so much happening with him, and he gives her these looks constantly throughout the film, and he's revealing nothing. Same thing that same look on her face at the end is kind of the same look on his face whenever she's trying to figure out what he is and what he knows, and he gives her nothing. I don't know, but I'm in love with it. I know that it works. Yeah. It works for me. Yeah.
Same, man. Same. This is a great example of a movie that like a lot of people can make, and it doesn't have to be on the same level. You don't need the crane shots, like you can get in a car and get some running shots. Like I think that people can make this happen guerrilla style, where you don't even get permits. You just shoot. You know what I mean? I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying it could be done. And I think that's inspiring. Anything like that, I'm super into, because I'm all about just going out and making something.
Yeah.
So, great movie.
Hell yeah. And this guy went on Tykwer, correct us. He's gone on to, do some really nice films. He's had this put him on the map, right? And from here, he got really, really good budgets. I mean, he was making, if you've never seen Perfume, Story of a Murderer, like that's a crazy movie. Now it's an adaptation from a novel, but that's a wild movie. But he's written for, the Wachowskis. He wrote the adaptation for Cloud Atlas, a bunch of things. He's been a rock star by my estimation.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think that's all I got. I know I had a bunch of other random notes. I mean, it looks like my notes look like chaos because I was just writing everything. Like, what does this mean? Does it mean something? She blinks 5 times, or I don't know. But what are you going to recommend this week?
Well, this week, oh man, I had it here, and then I'm going to recommend Black Mirror. There's a new Black Mirror season that's out, and it's weird because some of the episodes I'm like, okay, and then to others I just, oh my God, but I can't get enough of it. I just have always loved this series. I love the idea of one episode has nothing to do with the last one, so you absolutely have no idea what you're going to get. All new people, all new story, and it's always something that you don't expect. And to the 10th power, right? And they just take it and they go, okay, what would be normal? Okay, let's double that. And I just really enjoy it. So yeah, I'm going to recommend the new season of Black Mirror, which I don't know, what is it? Season 4 or something?
6.
Season 6 of Black Mirror. Thank you.
Crazy. Yeah, I got one more episode to go. It's been a treat because I get so inspired watching the way he takes an idea, concepts are the easy part. People, me included, like we think we have these really cool ideas. That's the easy part. The hard part is wrapping a really compelling story around it that makes you care about what's happening and what you're seeing, and then staying one step ahead of the audience. That's and taking on the journey you want to take them on. Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker is a genius, man. It's so inspiring. It's so good.
The one I most recently watched, I'm not going to give anything away, about the paparazzi. It's fantastic. Just fantastic. Okay. That's it. I can't talk anymore.
I watched that one yesterday. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm going to recommend an HBO film starring Sydney Sweeney. It's called Reality. This is one of those simple, genius, short movies. I want to say this is also under 80 minutes, maybe like 85. But sub 90 films are super fascinating, but even more fascinating if you can make it 70 to 80 minutes. It's called Reality, and it's about Reality Winner. That's a person. That's a person's name. She was a whistleblower several years ago, and this whole it's a beat by beat telling of her arrest, and it's absolutely thrilling, crushing. I think it's important. Sydney Sweeney is incredible. It's so funny watching her because there's some performances where I'm like, I will watch movies to watch her, and I'm like, you didn't bring it. I think the story wasn't strong enough for you as well. But if you give her a little bit of a story with some, compelling elements, she's absolutely phenomenal. Like watching her in White Lotus, watching her in Euphoria, she's magical. And watching her in Reality, same thing. She is magical. I'm really, really impressed with her, and a handful of other films. But it's one of those things. Sometimes she's on screen, I'm like, you're not here, you're not present. And whether that's your fault, the director's fault, I don't know. But whenever she's on, she is freaking amazing. And this is a really important story. I'm so impressed that she wanted to tell this story, because no one really wants to tell whistleblower stories unless it's like 30 years later when it doesn't really matter. And so the fact that, she's wanting to tell this story that's a bit smaller, but God, and the way they tell it, the directing on this thing, man, if you watch it, there's going to be a handful of times where your hair is going to stand up, just from some of the directing decisions. It catches you flat-footed, and there's no way to prepare for it. And that's what's so good about it. And that's why awesome. I would say that out loud. And so, anyway, on HBO Reality, and stay tuned for next week. We've gone from, where do we start? India to Ireland to Japan to London to Germany. And you know what? I'm tired, man. We're not done. We've seen everything this world has to offer. But Todd, what about other worlds? Why would we stop?
That's a great point.
At just this world? There's other worlds.
We shouldn't.
We should not.
We should expand.
We're going to go across the Spider-Verse and see the new animated film Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So yeah, we'll see what Miles is up to and catch up with some peeps. And yeah, I'm excited about that. Yeah. More to come. Stay tuned for that next week. And if you want to comment on this, don't forget, subscribe, review, leave us a note. Something you want us to talk about, a movie you want us to cover. Yeah, we'll probably consider that. We'll do a strong one. We've had a lot of requests lately. I think it's hard. Sometimes it's funny because I'll throw out like films to you sometimes, and it's funny the ones sometimes you gravitate. It took, I think, 2 suggestions before we did Kells. I love whenever you say no to a film, because I'm like, that helps me know when you say yes to a film, it's because you're excited about it. You want to do it. Sweet. Yeah. I never really know. And so some people, we got a request. What was it? Sopranos. And I was like, man, I can't get Todd to do Game of Thrones. The odds of sitting through like 78 episodes of Sopranos is not good. But keep them coming is my point. Like, we're always looking for new stuff to do. And I like putting together thematic things. This was an impromptu trip around the world. It wasn't planned, but I love finding these, through lines and themes and explorations, because I think juxtaposing one film against another can be really informative. There's so many things we didn't talk about that we could have if we were juxtaposing these films, like Spirit of the Way next to King's Speech is really fascinating to me because of the two character types and their experiences, and a young woman's journey versus an older king's journey, right? The vulnerability of women characters versus vulnerability of male characters. Like, there's so much more that you can take away from just watching and listening to those two episodes back to back. Yeah. Anyway, don't hesitate to throw out some recommendations. We're always, interested. And so if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/run Lola Run.
And our quote of the day today is from T.S. Eliot. It is a test, a positive test. I do not assert that it is always valid negatively, that genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. That's absolutely brilliant. Like, the best of the best. You just get it because you feel it emotionally, and then you understand what it is. I feel like music is a great example as well. Like, really good lyrics you just identify with and you don't really know why. I mean, if you've ever listened to The Streets Have No Name by U2, you just get it, and it just makes you feel something emotional before you even have any idea what he's saying, and I think that poetry is even probably stronger than music, because music you can identify emotionally with the sounds and the sonic texture and stuff, but poetry, I mean, you do have rhythm with it, and you do have if someone's speaking it, you have a voice, but really it's just, how is it weaving a web in your mind, and if you identify with the web that it's weaving, because your brain is processing all of these words faster than you can actually notice it, right? And it identifies or doesn't identify before you can actually understand what the words mean. I think that's so beautiful, such a beautiful way of saying it, a poetic way of saying it in general. And I feel like this is a great quote, man. Great selection here, because I'm a big fan of stream of consciousness, and of just creating and not thinking about what it is while you're even making it. And sometimes, and I think I mentioned it on the podcast before, I'm a big fan of Rick Rubin, and he's very much that style where he's like, it doesn't matter if you understand what it is that you're making. Even after it, if you understand what it is, it might not ever make sense to you, but if you like it, that's all that matters, right? And maybe you'll figure it out, and that'd be great. That's great. Oh yeah, that's what that meant. But if you're worried about, like, I need to understand this you've already lost, and I think that's just such a beautiful way of saying this. So great quote.
It is, because I think watching this movie, right, obviously he quotes T.S. Eliot, and there's this whole element to that, but it also, I feel like we understand on some level what's happening, even though we don't fully understand it. And I love what you're saying, because what's fascinating about that, look, poets often know exactly what they're doing. Like, they make this simple thing, look simple, even though it's really, really complex on the front end, what they're creating. And I'll link a video that I did with your wife where we deconstructed a Walt Whitman poem, and it's going through, and speaking of Breaking Bad, they quote this poem on the show. And so we use that clip in the video. And it's the Learned Astronomer. And looking at the poem, you're like, oh, I can see, it's beautiful. It's got some interesting ideas. And then watching how they deconstruct it, the professors, the University of Texas English professors deconstruct this thing in ways that I never would have picked up on. And so there's so much happening under the hood, sometimes intentionally, but listening to you talk about the creating process, like, yeah, sometimes you're creating and you don't know why you did what you did and why it's speaking to you. And I don't know how many times I've written something and realized after the fact, like, oh, it's working on these levels. There's so many other elements at play that maybe my subconscious was speaking to, or maybe I felt later on that I referred back to, and suddenly there's a theme there where there wasn't going to be one before, or maybe I was just being so honest about an emotion that you can't help but create this intention behind it because you were just being honest. And honesty has a way of feeding back into itself and regurgitating truths and truisms. Yeah. I think it's a really wonderful quote. It's a test that genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. And I love that he points out it's a positive test, as in when it works, you know it's working because of this reason. But if a poem isn't, communicating anything to you, then I'm not saying this test is holding up the same. But whenever it is working, it's working because of this. When it's really good, genuine poetry, it's communicating before you can pick it apart with your brain. You already understood.
Does the quote have the parentheses in it?
It does. Yeah.
It does? Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I love it.
Same.
That is cool. Great quote, man. And just a shout out to you for all the work you do on this. I mean, all the notes that you bring in, all of the expertise and the explanation and just week after week of doing the editing and having the ideas and all that stuff. Like, just kudos to you. I can't believe that we're episode 239, and that's all thanks to you. So
thanks,
kudos
man.
To Wesley.
Appreciate that.
You're the man. You're the man. I love this. I love the excuse to talk to you and meet with you every single week, even though we're 1,800 miles away. And if that's all that we get out of this, dude,
same.
It's worth it.
Yeah, same.
You know what I mean? I get to hang out with my best friend for a couple hours a week, no matter what.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for you
use
showing up
movies
every
as
week,
an
bro.
excuse.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks.
Awesome.
Man.
Well, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you liked this episode. Like Wes said, please subscribe, review us everywhere you get your podcasts, and share us with your friends. And if there's a film you'd like to hear us cover, please make the suggestion. Maybe we'll cover it if we can. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
Yeah.
Feels like you're running an incredible rate, Harry.